So thank you for being here. Tonight, we're going to begin by learning how we listen while we organize. As I already noted, listening happens throughout organizing, but it's the building block of our work together and what we will focus on practicing and learning about this month. So first, though, now that we have named ourselves and oriented ourselves to the why of being here, I want to invite Blanca to introduce herself and to ground us in the space. Blanca, thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Jules.
Thank you so much, Jules, and thank you for allowing me this space. Good evening, everyone. My name is Blanca Rosco, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm part of the Kali Casa Común team, and I'm here to share with you this evening a bit of a reflection, which I'd like to invite you, if you could get comfortable, find a space where you can relax a little bit, and I would like to invite you to close your eyes and share this small reflection with you. I invite you to take 3 deep breaths. We're going to listen to our breathing. And open the space for this reflection. Today, it's time to leave the bad things behind us. It's time to detoxify the heart and heal our soul, to seek out only what brings us peace. It's time to not turn the page, but instead change books entirely and notebooks to begin reading and writing something completely new. It's time to love ourselves more, to be happy in spite of the scars that we may have. It's time to dance with life, to start down new pathways, to move barriers and discover new worlds, to jump over all of the walls. It's time to open our eyes, to exhale the past, and to breathe in the present and inhale the future. Today is the time to expel yesterday in order to begin a better tomorrow. And with that brief reflection, I'd like to invite you, each of you, in your minds and in your hearts, to listen the word that this reflection has brought about in our hearts. And with that prompt, I'd like to invite you to open your eyes and to continue the next steps. I'd like to give thanks for this space, and I will pass it off to Jules.
Thank you, Blanca. Tonight, friends, we will kick it off right away with rooting ourselves in listening and learning how to listen. I know some of you are deeply practiced in this, so hopefully this teaching from our friend and colleague Joey Ager, who is an organizer in Tacoma, will deepen your experience of how to listen to your neighbors, yourselves, and your land. Joey's going to share his thoughts on how we can think about listening as an essential part of organizing. And for us, we call that the opportunity of engaging in sacred encounter. So I'm going to welcome Joey's reflections now. Thanks, Levita.
Hi friends, hope you're doing well. I'm Joey. I work with the Southwest Washington Synod of the ELCA and the Center for Urban Peacemaking. And we're going to take a few minutes to think together about sacred encounter. And if you've been around our work for a little while, you'll be familiar with this, the sacred organizing cycle or the sacred organizing spiral. And we think about the work of organizing in community as sacred encounter or listening, sacred unveiling or learning, sacred action, acting, and sacred pause, reflection. What we're going to do just for a few minutes together is think about this first stage of the sacred organizing spiral, sacred encounter. So, what is sacred encounter? Well, as a reminder, encounter means to see, to hear, to perceive simply, without a lot of judgment. And in sacred organizing, we encounter others in our community, our church, or in our neighborhoods. And we encounter the Spirit in our work. And we encounter the land and the stories around us. And if we don't begin by carefully encountering our context simply for what it is, then we'll always be acting on assumptions or biases or our own unchecked guesses about what might be true of our context. So we encounter in order to be truly present in our context, to be grounded in the true reality of our context, and to see our context clearly. So in this video, I want to explore this stage and specifically describe how it actively helps us to move forward toward focused collective action. So to begin, I want to surface a key white institutional cultural reality that we're often caught in, and that is the belief that listening and acting are separate and are disconnected. Have you ever been in a part of a group where half the people want to jump into action, but when you push them on who they're listening to, they're not sure? Or maybe you've been with a group of people who want to talk more and listen more and study a subject more, but when you push them on what they plan to do with what they hear, they're also not sure. So what's critical to say here is that sacred encounter, listening to your neighbors, listening to those in your church or your community, listening to others, sacred encounter is not inaction. It's not inaction. And it's not separate from the active process of sacred organizing. It's an integral part of the sacred organizing spiral. And practicing encounter moves us toward our goals. So to illustrate this, I want to share a metaphor that's helped me to think about how we can practice community processes where sacred encounter actually builds. It builds structures, builds organizations, builds campaigns, builds projects. So I want to start by reflecting on how we generally build things. So when I want to build something, like the retaining wall that I have a need for in the front of my garden, the process generally looks a bit like this. I need to come up with a design, hopefully a good design that meets the codes on engineering and other requirements. I need to gather the uniform materials, the bricks or the rebar or whatever I'm building this from, probably from Home Depot. And I need to execute my plan. So this is a straightforward, conventional approach to any project. I make a plan, a design, I gather materials that are uniform, and then I build, I execute. And what I observe is that I think we've internalized this process for how to build all sorts of things. Organizations, programs, ministries, projects, campaigns. Typically, we think in these terms. A leader with a vision and an understanding of the problem comes up with a plan. We gather the uniform materials, the people in our community, partnerships, etc. And then leaders execute the plan. But I want to share an alternative way of thinking about building. And that is this: the dry stain wall or a dry stone wall. A dry stain is a wall that's found all over Scotland that's built without mortar or cement or lime. Rocks aren't shaped into uniformity. But at the end of the process, there is a wall successfully built. The purpose has been achieved, but the process is really different. The process of building a dry stain wall looks like this. First, we encounter the rocks in their uniqueness. We simply encounter the rocks. Hold a rock, look at it, see it, listen, pay attention just to the rock as it is. Then we begin to notice alignment. When we encounter many rocks, we notice ways they could connect, ways they might align. Then we invite connection. And then we're building together. The role of the builder in this process, the role that I think we need to play in our communities, is to practice encounter with our neighbors and with one another as our neighbors are today, right now. To practice encounter with our neighbors as they are right now. To notice how and where there may be alignment, and to make invitations to connect. Friends, the people in your church, in my church, are like rocks. They're not like bricks. They're unique, they're different, they're complex. They can't be easily slotted into a design that's made by others. We need to build this way, I think, in our churches, in our communities. I think this is what relational leadership looks like. But why else? Why should we build this way? Well, I think this work is about uncovering reality rather than fighting against it. And our faith tells us that the Spirit has shaped these rocks. There's many different shapes and sizes. They're not uniform bricks. The people in our communities are different and varied, different shapes and sizes. And we can discover the purpose of our different shapes if we operate in this way. Because the truth is there is space for all sizes and shapes. We need everyone's individuality. The second reason is that because assuming, or even worse, actively shaping people to be uniform so that they fit our plan is violence, is colonization. Literally, the word colonization means to copy. And so a process that requires people to function more like bricks is risking colonization and violence. And then thirdly, I think we should build this way because this is a sustaining way to build. Dry stains in the Highlands of Scotland stand for generations because they're grounded in the natural shape of the rocks. So in the worksheets connected to this video, you'll find some support for practicing sacred encounter with others in your community. And generally this takes the shape of intentional one-to-one conversations where you make space to listen simply to others who might be connected to your project. My experience is that community work is largely done in authentic one-to-ones where we create trust, unlock imagination, and bring everyone into the work of community. So I look forward to walking with you as we practice sacred encounter.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Marawood Bolanos, and I am a community organizer in the Roseway and Cully neighborhoods with the Casa Común team. And I've been part of the Housing Coalition for several years now. I'm not even sure how many at this point. But I have had the great opportunity now to be able to invite you to meet up with another unique stone who is here in this space this evening. We will have two practices to practice conversations, one-to-ones, and this will be our first conversation. The second conversation will be with the same person, So you will have yet another opportunity to deepen that conversation later on. So for now, you will have 12 minutes in just a couple minutes now. Lavita is going to be splitting us up into small groups, partners, groups of 2. And the prompt will be, and the question will be answering, what are the moments in your life in which you have most longed for community or to feel a sense of belonging? What have been the moments in your life in which you have most longed for a community and or wanted to feel that you belonged? So in just a few moments, we're going to be meeting up with one other person in a breakout room. We'll have 12 minutes. And then after that, you'll be able to reference the question there in the chat, and then we'll return to this space to the whole group.
I figured we'd have a lot in common.
Yeah, like hating the same county commissioner and both being on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter.
Truly the deepest bond. Isn't he just the worst though? Like, I can't believe some of the stuff he was saying, like about our unhoused neighbors. I've had to live actually out of my car for a few months because I couldn't pay rent. And it could happen to anyone. And Ken East he just doesn't get that.
He is literally like the worst. He doesn't pay attention to anyone who isn't him. If I had $1 million, I would fund a candidate running against him the next time he's up for re-election.
And that would help because no quality candidates ever get elected in our county. It's filled with uninformed, apathetic people who don't even pay attention or vote.
Right? I literally know so many people who don't like him either, but they don't vote or pay enough attention, except when I yell at them about it. Oh, hang on one second. Okay. Yeah, anyway, yeah, there's just so many people who've been like on the edge of homelessness, and it feels like if they knew how little the county cares about them, they might be motivated to do something.
But do what? There's really nothing we can do, right? Until Ken East is out of office.
Well, actually, my church story circle is really involved in community organizing, and we think that everyone should join our church to get a recall vote going.
I don't know if I'm actually comfortable being part of a church. We're at a coffee shop that allows dogs. Sorry. I don't know if I'm actually comfortable being part of a church. I've had a really bad experience with.
Well, Story Circle isn't like other churches. We're a cool church. We let gay people in and everything. And what we're doing in the community is just, it's so important. Joining just makes more sense than doing it on your own. That's what community organizing is about.
I guess so. Okay.
You know, actually, the text I got earlier was for my next meeting, and it was earlier than I thought. So I'm gonna have to go. Can I text you to reschedule?
Yeah. When were you possibly thinking? Maybe we can talk about that.
Well, you know, like I'm really busy and I'm doing, you know, just so many important things with community organizing. So I don't know. I'll be in touch.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. See. And we will now move on to Brett, who will pick up where we left off.
I am betting and hoping that your one-to-ones that you just had went better than Des and Stories. My name is Brett Pinder. I'm a United Methodist clergy person and a companion for one of our congregational teams this year, First UMC. Hello. In a moment, I'm going to invite you to another round of one-to-one conversations. So if you're feeling ready to take another crack at conversation that goes a little bit deeper, a little more intentional, we're going to do that in just a moment. First, I want to name something that happens as we have each of those conversations, and especially something that happens as we have a series of those conversations. In our one-to-one conversations, we aim to invite someone to share their own story. In that instance, we get a chance to really encounter that person and their story, as Joey Ager invited us to think about. We also get the chance to share some of our story and get to encounter what resonates or is not resonant between our own stories. And as we have more and more of those conversations, we can start to find patterns of experiences that lots of us hold. So our one-to-one conversations start as my story, or the story of an individual, and can become a shared story, a story of us, of shared experience, and then become a story of many of us sharing experiences. Maybe some of those shared stories and experiences are very beautiful things, but some of them point to the issues and systems and pressures that we face and that we have a lot of say in changing. The building block of a conversation moves us from the story of one to a story of us to a story of the systems we live in. So now an invitation to another set of one-to-ones, maybe to go deeper than you went the first time, hopefully definitely to go better than the one that Story and Des showed. Keeping in mind the depth of conversation that you would want to have to move from a story of one to a story of us to a story of systems. I'm going to invite us into this next round of one-to-ones. And we're making it a little bit easy to have that conversation about moving towards systems by literally asking you to talk about those systems. I want to invite you into a conversation about the question of how does the world we live in contribute to or exacerbate the ways we still long for community and connection. Like before, you'll have 12 minutes with the same person. And when we return, we'll harvest out from both of those one-to-one experiences with my colleague Mira. Lavita is going to send us back into our breakout pairs.
Brent, can you repeat that question one more time? It broke out a little at the end.
I sure can. The question, which I think is also going into the chat box, is how does the world we live in contribute to or exacerbate the ways we still long for community and connection?
So reflecting on these conversations that you've had, what are you feeling curious about?
And a reflection on what we just went through, the importance of community and how it's hard to be isolated. But when you have barriers to it, people are very, when you need community, people are very creative on how they can do community. And we talked about one incident where there was a choir that wanted to get together, but because of COVID, they couldn't. And so they did it all on Zoom and then put it all together again. And there's very few people I know. I don't even know anybody who wants to be isolated and alone. And I think people will go to great extent to figure out how they can connect with people. And so I think it's innate, it's important, and it's important for me to help facilitate that because I see the importance of people getting together.
Thank you, Joanne. What felt challenging during your conversations? And what new clarity did you find?
Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm an immigrant and asylum seeker. Sometimes I feel homesick and isolated. And I was trying to, when I lost my childhood friends in my country, I'm trying to make new countries here in the US because I'm adopted to Western lifestyle and American lifestyle. But I have some challenging sometimes, language challenging and misunderstanding, miscommunication, body language, and all these contribute as a miscommunication to other stuff. And some community, if you tell them immigrants or refugee or asylum seeker, they think we are militia or army running from fleeing from our countries, and that's totally not true. It doesn't mean we are army or personnel. We are just ordinary civilian. We are seeking asylum for either political or religious, because some countries, they don't have this code or a human right. And I really appreciate, the community, my community, Westminster Presbyterian Church, and other communities here in Portland, how they are open-minded to, to everyone, to all, as long as you are, treat every human being with full dignity, integrity, and inclusion and equity. And that's what I believe, that they let me live the American dream and the American values, which opposite with a lot of people who are in the media and social media influenced by foreign influence, unfortunately, and they don't follow the American values, which means inclusion and anti-racist action, because I believe God created all of us in 9 months. He didn't created me in 9 months, 5 months, and created other human 9 months. He created all of us, rich, poor, righteous and not righteous, black, white, brown, yellow, purple, men, women, trans, all 9 months. And, God doesn't look what we look like. He looks at our heart, and to be kind and be nice and spread, the joy to others. And what I give you just a summary of the Holy Bible said, love God and love people. That's easy. That's what the Bible teach. And Jesus, before he ascended into heaven, he said, the last thing he said, love each other. He didn't say hate each other, love each other. And that's message to all humanity. And it is, I feel sad when I see my brother and sister homeless sleep in the street. I feel ashamed, because we came from the same father, Adam, and our mother, Eve. We are from the same father and mother, and we shouldn't, as a community, as a government, city, or whatever, allow this to human misery in the street. And I hope this is just first step with many steps, build up and overcome this issue. And thank you for giving me your time.
Muchas gracias por compartir.
Thank you so much for sharing. Just a few more questions to close this time. What pressures did you hear in your conversations? Also, another question would be, what's the difference between the two conversations you had that you heard? What's the difference? What changed? Did you learn something from the bad conversations that you witnessed? Anybody could respond to any of these questions. We've got a few more minutes.
I'd love to hear from some of the Levin staff, some of the, point out some of the wrong things that Story and Des did in their fake conversation. Because I think for some of us who are a little newer, we're like, oh, which parts were the good parts and which parts were the wrong parts?
I'll add, what I noticed in both of their parts was neither of them was curious at all about the other one. They came into that conversation and both of them had an opinion about something. They did have something in common, but they didn't even probe deeper into, why is this so important to you? How did you end up there? Why did you spend time on such a painful event? It was so hard to be there. So that lack of curiosity really felt very shocking to me.
Yeah, to add on to that, there's a moment we added where I express in the one-to-one that I have had some experience with houselessness in that script. And Des didn't follow up with any like curiosity about that. Like, it was like right after Des had said Ken West only cares about himself and what he thinks, and then I share something that is bordering on vulnerable, and Des starts talking about Ken West again. So yes, that lack of curiosity, just us ranting together, which can be fun sometimes, but is not always helpful.
I also noticed that bless your heart, Des, I know that's not really something you'll do, but you didn't read the room with Story. Like, you jumped straight to action. We should do this and you should do this. And when Story responded with, actually, that makes me really uncomfortable, instead of exploring that more or even doing repair work in that conversation, Des was already distracted and off to a different thing. Oh, well, this person's not going to meet my agenda. They're not important to me. I'm going to go to the next meeting. And wrote off Story. I don't know. Does anybody else see something in there? It was a rich set of failures. Thanks, Story and Des.
It was an embarrassment of riches, truly.
Somebody from the East County side said the church recruitment thing was really cringy too. That's in the chat.
I think you said something really important about going in with an agenda. And when we do that, we've started off on the wrong foot. It can only go bad from there.
Thank you very much for sharing. Next part with Jules.
You all are here. We've got 41 people in this room. We have 24 teams this year in the coalition, just going through the cohort. Many more, more than 60 in the coalition statewide. And our work is to change things, right? And the only way we can do that, the only way we can stand up to the systemic powers that press in on us and that came up in, I'm sure, your one-to-ones tonight around your loved ones and your own stories and your neighbors, the only way we can do that is to counter that power with our own. And that means people. And especially when we have marginalized experiences, when we are living under pressure, it takes a lot of us to be able to move those systems. And so I will say to you all, building a team through this year in your congregation, in your community, is going to be essential, using the skills that you were practicing tonight. So I want to talk a little bit about how you build a team and just very quickly give you some tips for this. I'll actually send out a sheet when I email you all later next week as follow-up. So you'll get this resource as well. But first, forming a team of leaders is a bit of a science and an art. Both of them start with the magic C word that we used earlier, which is curiosity. So I want you to get curious. You already have started a team. If you're here, it's because you formed at least 3 people and we said, you're ready. So you have some ability already, but make a list of people you're curious about and that you want to have one-to-one conversations with. So I'll ask these questions and you see them on the slide. Who are you curious about? Like people in your neighborhood, in your congregation, in your community, in your life, beyond those places. And I just want you to write down 3 people that you want to get to know better. No agenda, not because you're going to invite them to a team, but just to know better because you think that you want to know more about them. Also, who might have interest in this work? Who is pressed in on because of housing, because of land, because of lack of belonging? Write down 3 names of people who you think have passion or personal experience or pressures related to what we're doing. And we call that self-interest in organizing, self-interest, which some folks get a little itchy about, but all self-interest is something that someone cares about and wants to act on. So who is interested? Also, just look around for who's relational and creative and might have some risk-taking guts for organizing, for changing things in their community. You know, technical know-how, especially about housing or land or zoning, that's always helpful at certain junctures. But what you need as a core team is a group of people who are going to break through that inertia that we all experience of isolation and are going to instead nurture relationships. People who can hear stories and weave a new story. Who's brave enough not to go alone? Also, you want to ask, who's well connected? This makes sense, I think. This is natural to ask. There's an old organizing adage that says leaders have followers. But we also say, and maybe it's more true for this work, leaders can call upon relational trust that they've built with other people and invite those people along to become leaders themselves. So, who has relational trust in your community? Who has networks? Who do people follow? Write those people down and begin to have one-to-ones with them. And then, and I think this is actually one of the most important tips for building a core team and for, frankly, doing organizing anywhere, is who is on the edges of the community. As you write down the names of people from the 1 through 4 above that I listed, you're mapping the people that you're thinking of who you really already know or who may not be on the edges of the community possibly, or you don't know that they are. But then I want you to also think about like an outer circle there, naming new people, community partners, neighbors, that one person who engages, but not in the way that you do, or folks that are around the edges doing incredible things that you're like, man, that person really understands how to move people to do something new. So just remember that relationship is all about where your edge and somebody else's edge meet. And edges of the community also means people with experience of the pressures that you're concerned about, right? All of those things matter. Who's on the margins, both literally and figuratively. So you'll notice that what I did not say is put up a sign-up sheet. And I did not say who usually fills the leadership positions in your nonprofit or your congregation. If you find yourself reaching out to the usual suspects, then I want you to put the phone down and go back to number 1 on the list, which is, who are you curious about? So just use your imagination. This is how we build power, friends. This is how we win. This is how we take action that matters. This is how we show up and impress elected officials and people with power, quote unquote, inside our systems, by showing up and having people who we are following and who we are leading. So I encourage you to take some of that time over the next couple of weeks with your core team as it exists now and do some of that work. So thank you so much. I will send out some of that information. So if you couldn't take the notes you wanted, we'll make sure that you get those. All right. My friend and colleague, compañera Yasmin, is going to invite you into some next steps. We will also send these out by email, but please pay attention to especially the dates and the opportunities to act that she invites you into. So, Yasmin, thank you.
Gracias, gracias,
Thank
Jules.
you. Thank you, Jules. My name is Jasmine Vélez, and I'm a Cully community organizer. I am part of the Housing Coalition and have been for several years now, 4 years. And I'm part of the Casa Común team in the Cully area. We're going to be showing you some of the next steps and assignments for this month. We will start meeting up as core teams. That's a first step. The leaders of the core teams should be scheduling future meetings. Don't forget to include those who accompany you. If you don't yet have a core team, or if you don't know who will be accompanying you, send an email to Jules in that case, and she will share her email in the chat. You should also start scheduling some one-to-ones, first among the core team members and later on in the broader community. You need to establish an objective. You can schedule and have at least 3 individual meetings with people who you're curious about. Another point would be, as a coalition, our objective is to have at least 100 one-to-ones this month. Take notes and reflect after you meet up with someone and evaluate what you've heard and learned. what relation do you have with what you've heard elsewhere? What is their self-interest? And you'll see the notes in the chats. Another point is organize the core team meeting before the November meeting, which is going to be on November 2nd from 6:30 to 8, and invite new and fellow core team members. And don't forget to also sign up for the coalition's newsletter to receive information about events, actions, and monthly team resources. And that will be in the chat as well. And some very, very, very important and exciting news that we have is that our first housing on the ground will be opening on October 18th at 11 a.m. at Portsmouth Union Church. So come and see the ribbon cutting with the governor and others who helped make the impossible possible. And we've also learned so many things. I can share that building together and practicing the encounters and make invitations and share from the heart. So I invite you to do this with us, and we'll continue forward one step at a time. So I'd like to pass it off to Jules. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin, so much for all of that great opportunity to act and also to celebrate. This work is hard, friends, and sometimes we don't get to celebrate it for a really long time, right? So it is good to get to celebrate things like the opening of Portsmouth Union's Portsmouth Commons for 20 veterans in the next 2 weeks. I want to invite you to another action. You probably know now, because we did not have our October 1st kickoff, that we pivoted to act on behalf of our Westminster Presbyterian and Barbies Village core teams to support them on Indigenous Peoples Day in Laurelhurst at the Barbies Village future site on the 9th of October, which is coming up very quickly. And if one of the people on the team can put that detail in the chat, that would be awesome. But we are going to gather, I believe, at 4 o'clock and begin that action. So we will watch your emails if you haven't already gotten that detail, and we'll make sure you have that invitation to be able to turn out and act and press in on the presbytery to continue our efforts around land back for Barbies Village. We did it. We did it. We have done one of our 9 gatherings. And I want to say thank you as we start this year for building teams, for building power, for learning how to organize, for organizing together. Some of you are in the midst of hard work. Some of you are about to begin, and some of you are discerning how to act. And so it is good to do that with you and to come out of isolation and into community in order to be a community together, right? A community of organizers. I want to invite you, if you'd like, to stay for just a few minutes. You can log off if you need to once we say goodbye, but there's a 6-minute, very short 6-minute video about the larger movement we're a part of, the Sacred Organizing House. And if you want to see that video, I invite you to stick around for just a moment, but otherwise we will see you next month, the first Thursday of November at 6:30 p.m. Lavita, you want to kick that video off for those folks that want to watch it?
We're feeling anxiety and our mental health is suffering.
We know that we can protest and volunteer at the soup kitchen, but how do we make a lasting systemic difference?
There are healing spaces and there's justice spaces, but what if they coexisted? What if we could have both?
The things that I kept seeing was we have people doing policy work, but no one that's affected by that policy is in that room.
When we don't hear the resilient memories, or we are not affected by the resilient memories from the past, we live in a lie.
A few years ago, a few of us came together
across our communities and asked what could become possible if we stopped working in isolation and started working together.
When I joined what is now known as Portsmouth Union Church, they were worshiping 4 to 6 people on a Sunday and were told that they needed to close. But they had this powerful ministry with folks that were camping on their property in North Portland. And they said, you know what, if we're gonna go down, we might as well do something really magnificent. Let's build affordable housing. And we had no idea what that meant.
I was an organizing fellow at the time and saw that it wasn't just about making change for Portsmouth. It was about changing the project for the next person and the project after that.
So we joined the cohort and I met other people who cared about houseless people, who cared about affordable housing. We were more powerful because we were a coalition, and calls started getting answered and we started breaking through the red tape. And 5 years later, over 50 congregations are doing the same kind of work. Over 400 units of housing are in development or on the ground. And we really were able to see how organizing together can take you from a tiny little project of 20 units to a whole state's worth of effort that really moves the needle on houselessness.
There's a few folks at Westminster that have been kind of talking for a long time, years, about maybe a way to do more about racial justice.
I remember wondering, where is this all going? We were learning the hidden history of Indigenous displacement and racialized neighborhood covenants and how our congregation as landowners benefited from all of it. We were humbled.
Also understanding our personal stories and realizing that our congregation had been called into being to serve the needs of European Americans that were moving into this part of Portland and excluding anybody else.
I remember meeting the Future Generations Collaborative, a collective of multiple Indigenous-led organizations who have been stewarding the dream of Barbie's Village, this affordable tiny home community and education center for Indigenous folks. They were looking for land, and our denomination was getting ready to make a decision about what to do with the property of a closed Presbyterian church up the street. We started to build mutual relationships and trust. On Indigenous Peoples Day, the vision for Barbie's Village went public with over 600 people gathered. What if we gave the land back as an act of repair?
As the solo pastor of a small community in a rural part of Oregon, the cohorts have connected me and my community to friendships and to issues that we care about.
To me, sacred organizing is about aligning our deepest values with the work we're doing to build a more just world.
Detrás de mí había una gran comunidad, la coalición, todas
There was a
las
huge
personas que
community
me
and coalition
rodeaban, me
behind
apoyaban
me.
y eso me inyectaba
Everyone who was
demasiado.
surrounding
Y
me
yo decía,
was
esta
supporting me,
energía tengo que
and that
ponerla
gave
en
me
mi
so much energy. It was
comunidad, en el
energy
rancho,
that
con
I
mis
needed to
vecinos.
invest in my
cohort
community, in my neighbors.
slowed us down and kept us from causing more harm by just reminding us to trust the process and to move forward and to not get ahead of ourselves.
When I hear about people's experience of working in cohorts, I hear them being energized about partnership, collaboration, and the ways that spirit can work when we're together to illuminate imagination, to spark deeper faithfulness, and to really engage us into action. I see vitality bubbling.
When everyday people start to organize, they start to realize how much courage they actually have.
No matter which cohort you join, you become part of a powerful community of leaders committed to organizing in a shared movement home towards repair, resilience, and liberation for our people and planet.
Together, we've practiced our way to the possible.
Thanks, folks. Hope that gave you something to take with you tonight, that gives you hope and opportunity. We will see you very, very soon. Happy October.